So over the summer, I looked in the sink and I noticed some hair. And at first, I thought it was my pubes because I am that tall and I do straighten them. But it wasn't, and I had to go to the doctor, and he like prescribed me Propecia.
What's up, guys? Derek, moreplates.com. Today we're going to be talking about Pete Davidson and him taking Finasteride, or that's what Propecia is, to prevent hair loss. So if you don't know what Propecia is, it is the, hair loss dosage format for Finasteride, which is also sold as Proscar in 5 milligram tablets for benign prostatic hyperplasia. The 1 milligram iteration is sold for hair loss prevention though. So this is, what Propecia is. There's not a difference really. It's just Finasteride again, just a different dosage format. But anyways, this is just another, celebrity coming out and talking about their hair loss publicly and talking about their, pharmacology and hair loss intervention, which is interesting because, most of these guys keep it on the down low. Like Ashton Kutcher came out and talked about, apparently he didn't even realize that Avodart and Finasteride are not interchangeable for one another, and are actually significantly different drugs in terms of how strongly they suppress your DHT levels.
When I was like 25, I noticed it was starting to go, and so I went and met the doctor, hair guy doctor, and he was like, he put me on this medication called Avodart. Have you ever heard of this stuff?
No.
So anyway, it's like a finasteride, the byproduct of testosterone.
Which kind of delved into, in some of his interviews in the past that I've gone over in one of my past videos, as well as, it became more evident in his podcast with Dax Shepard, where Dax talks about being on Propecia, and then Ashton talks about coming off of Avodart, but they're talking about, which is dutasteride, by the way, and they're kind of like talking about Propecia and dutasteride like they're the same drug when they're not, obviously.
I've got this receding hairline. You know about it.
Well,
I've told you all about it.
I did want to ask you about that because you've gone off of Propecia.
Yeah, I'm
just think
completely off.
So risky of you. I don't know what I want. Can I out us for this? I just want to say that I'll just say I went to a doctor. I had heard that there was this doctor who could give you a hair as thick as Brad Pitt's. And he would stab you in the head repeatedly with a syringe, and he would inject God knows what, chicken egg serum or something. And I was going to this guy, and I was doing it for like 2 years or something. I was like, and then finally I was like, what am I doing? I'm going, this guy's jabbing my head with a needle. Nothing's happening. But I did do that.
There's this, I've participated in all of these things. Anything.
Well, now I will out you. I think we both went to this doctor.
I think I recommended the guy to you. What are you talking about?
And then my whole thing was, remember, I didn't like, they would put a numbing spray on your head. And then I got off on the fact I was like, no numbing spray.
Listen.
I felt sissy enough to even be there getting this thing done. I thought the only bit of masculinity I could retain is that I'd go no numbing spray.
I've gone off of anything to retain. So when I started getting very concerned when I was about 25 that it was going. Right? I was like, it's
Mad
going.
dash.
And I'm 25. I've got I had to maintain.
Yeah, it's
and
scary.
So that's when I went on the Avodart, and I started to go see the guy that did the needle.
Stab your head.
And I was just
times.
like, about I think like 5 years ago or something, I was like, I can't do the guy.
You got to get up the treadmill.
Like I can't do the guy. So I stopped doing the guy, and I was like, oh, I'm hanging in there. Right?
Yeah, right.
And then when I had kids, I didn't know what the side effects of this Avodart stuff were relative to like having children. And I was like, you know what? I don't want to risk it. I'm just going to stop. So I stopped, and I did really good for like a year. And then now it's starting to like,
thinning out a little bit.
Out. But here's.
So what's the solution? More hats or back on Avodart?
No, I'm not.
You're never going to go back on Propecia.
No, I'm just. So here's
it's so reckless of you.
So here's what happened.
I'm still on it, by the way.
Like dutasteride has, potentially a significantly higher side effect profile too, just like far worse even than Propecia as far as DHT suppression goes, because it pretty much fucking nukes it, to be honest. So, but again, it's just funny how like they don't even really know necessarily what it does. They just talk about the side effects like as a joke almost, like, oh, I'm impotent, but I can, but I keep my hair, so it's fine.
Yeah, and so how's it working out?
It's working out. I have all my hair, and girls still want to get with me, but I'm impotent, so I could care less,
It's like funny, it's lighthearted, but at the end of the day, this is a very strong, it's like an anti-androgen basically. And, they talk about it in this, they add comedy to it, whatever. To me personally, I think it's cool how it's even being brought to the surface though, because a lot of people when it comes to celebrities and hair loss, obviously, you know, self-image is very important to these celebrities, and, you know, being able to come out in the open and talk about what kind of drugs they're using for such, like, you know, vain purposes is probably something the majority of them wouldn't want to do. And I feel like being more transparent nowadays is, you know, more relatable and kind of like, you know, makes them more likable in general. And Pete Davidson, though, he's only like 26, I think, right now. And this video was February 18th, 2017. So he was, what is this, 3 years ago? So he was like 23 years old in this video, and he was already, you know, starting Propecia. So obviously, either he's trying to be proactive because he knows that the likelihood is high. Maybe it's actually because one of his best friends is Machine Gun Kelly, and he saw what happened to Machine Gun Kelly, who had to get an extensive hair transplant to correct his issue. And it's certainly possible he just didn't want to end up the same route. So he was proactive about it and started Propecia. And to be honest, in my opinion, obviously I'm not one to say you should or shouldn't use drugs for, you know, preventing hair loss, but you should at least start to consider it, even if you are. And when I say consider it, I mean even just like starting to research hair loss prevention at a young age, just because the overwhelming likelihood is that it's going to happen to you too, unfortunately. And most people don't notice it until, you know, 20 to 30,000 hairs have miniaturized off their head before they can actually visually, cosmetically see a difference. And then one day they think it just snuck up on them, and they just noticed, you know, diffuse thinning and heavy downlighting one day, and they thought, oh, what the fuck, all of a sudden I'm losing my hair. It's like, no, in reality, you've been losing it for 10 years and you just are noticing it cosmetically now because you haven't done anything about it. So personally, you know, this is just another case, in my opinion, of proactive management, and it's making sure it doesn't, like, it's way easier to keep it than it is to recover it. So, you know, being proactive about it is a very good idea on Pete Davidson's part, in my opinion, because if you get to a point where you have to play catch up, like, you're never going to have the same outcome, or you're going to have a much harder time getting to the same level of hair quality as you would if you just proactively prevented it to begin with. So I guess good on him for, you know, being transparent about it and sort of, you know, bringing it to the public and not trying to hide it. Like so many of these other celebrities, like fucking Matthew McConaughey, and I'll do another video on him and his ridiculous, you know, stances on what he's done to prevent his hair loss. And like some of these other celebrities are not so open about what they do. But Pete, I don't know if that's the only thing he's doing, but if he is, you know, at that early of an age, that's probably all he's doing. I doubt he's really delving into like hardcore experimental routes or anything like that. But that's probably perfectly sufficient for most people. And like the likelihood is that he's going to be side effect free, despite all of his jokes about it. But with that being said, of course, there's not, you know, no chance of side effects. And in that case, just be wary of it, because there is, you know, anytime you introduce an anti-androgen, despite it being, you know, like a 5-alpha reductase inhibitor, it sounds all fancy. Realistically, it's just a fancy way of saying it's inhibiting the enzyme that is responsible for creating the most masculinizing hormone in your body, the hormone that literally pushed you through puberty. So if you're inhibiting the production of the thing that literally pushed you through puberty, you know, despite there being a relative lack of, you know, incidence of side effects in the clinical data and literature, it doesn't mean it's impossible. And there are tons of people who've had, you know, really, really bad debilitating side effects from finasteride. And, you know, I would advise being proactive, but also being proactive about managing the potential for side effects. And that's why elaborate blood work, I feel like, is justified before haphazardly jumping into something like finasteride. At least you can assess your likelihood of encountering side effects with blood work before you actually delve into it. If you actually see your hormone profile on a piece of paper beforehand, you can kind of gauge what your androgen to estrogen ratios are like. You can see what your, you know, SHBG levels are at. You can see what your free androgen levels are at, your free DHT relative to your free T, relative to your sensitive assay estradiol, all these things that are going to determine largely if inhibiting the most androgenic hormone in your body is going to potentially push you down to the point where you have symptoms of, you know, erectile dysfunction, you know, almost like representative of hypogonadal symptoms to some extent. And then, you know, there are obviously the minority of individuals that may have neurosteroid deprivation as a result of finasteride use too, which sounds scary. And these are all things that should be considered before you just jump into it. But at the same time, it's also not something to dissuade you entirely from being proactive. So this is kind of like two contradicting things I'm saying here, but basically I'm just trying to say do your research before you start popping things that are going to deplete your androgen levels, but also be proactive and try and research as much as you can as soon as possible so you understand how to manage and predict with reasonably good accuracy if you're at a, if you're vulnerable to encountering those side effects should you, jump into those medications. So as far as, the blood test I would recommend you get, if you're going to get an elaborate panel, I will link the one that I would recommend below to make sure that once you've started these drugs, you can't see your baseline again. So before you just haphazardly jump into them, I highly recommend you check all of your markers, all your biomarkers that can then give you some sort of clear picture on what you were working with at baseline. So if you are one of the unfortunate individuals who encounters debilitating side effects, or you're one of the, even smaller minority of individuals who has post-finasteride syndrome, even after discontinuing its use, you can then look at your blood work after you've been on the finasteride and see where everything's at, and then compare it to your baseline blood work, and then get a very clear picture on what is being thrown off proportionally and where to kind of backfill certain holes that may have been screwed up or where you have an issue. Because 99% of people don't have this, and most doctors will just haphazardly prescribe finasteride without even encouraging you to get blood work to check your health status prior. So that is my recommendation. Be proactive, but also do your research and get your blood work beforehand so you actually know how to manage potential risk. So anyways, thank you guys for watching. Please like, subscribe, check out my blog, moreplatesmoredates.com. Follow me on Instagram at moreplates_moredates, Facebook, Snapchat, BitChute, Twitter, TikTok, Apple Podcasts. If you do listen on audio on the podcast, please drop a 5-star rating. It really helps the algorithm there, I'm assuming, as well as if you drop a comment and like here, it helps the algorithm on YouTube a lot. So please do that. Definitely helps here. As well as I definitely recommend you sign up for the mailing list if you want to get sent pharmacology deep dives into hair loss prevention, more concise and, I guess professionally broken down subsections of my content in like palatable written format with hyperlinks to all the clinical studies I reference in my videos that you can then go and delve deeper into yourself for your own further research and your own further education about this stuff that I may otherwise not put in the videos, and it's a lot of incentive to sign up for the articles, totally free. So I recommend you sign up for that. Thank you guys for watching. Talk to you soon.